Well, looking at these university caps as well, which the coalition, I might say, has a similar policy of its own, perhaps it would go even further. That is going to do nothing to help the cost of living, is it?
Well, that's not true. In fact, we know that this incredibly high migration, the fact that the immigration program in Australia has managed to get away from Labor and got out of
international
control,
students
is one of the reasons why building costs are so high. Well, there's 500,000 international students that are moving into the private rental market. You can't say that with 500,000 new entrants into the private rental market that's not pushing up rents even further. We do want to see caps on international students. However, we believe that negotiating individually with each university, depending on their individual needs, depending on the region, depending on their business model, is the way to go, rather than having a blanket formula that applies to everybody.
I mean, in South Australia, for example, they have a 10% vacancy rate in the student accommodation market. They have these caps as well. That doesn't make sense.
Which is why it's so important to speak to the individual universities and work out what it is that's most appropriate for them. But student caps are a way to go about this, and they are pushing up private rents. There is no doubt about it. We want to make sure that we can bring down rents,
the evidence
but in a
of that,
sustainable
Jane,
way.
To be fair, because in Sydney and Melbourne, the renting crisis is starting to moderate, and there hasn't been a dramatic reduction in international students in that time.
Well, you don't need to look very far, Laura. Even I myself was standing in a queue for a rental property with my university-aged son not that long ago at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning in the rain. There would have been 40 to 50 groups of people, not people, groups of people in line to look at one pretty ordinary-looking rental property.
But were they
there is a rental crisis in Australia. There is no doubt about it now. Some of them absolutely were international students. There is no doubt about it that we're in a rental crisis right now. Obviously, we want to make sure that we can add to the building stock through building supply. There's much more work that needs to be done in that space. But in the meantime, a reduction that is targeted specifically to the area, specifically to the university, in international student caps is an appropriate way to go.
But, I mean, your side of politics and Labor bang on about productivity. This is a productivity measure as well. Universities don't get international students. They're high paying. That means less money goes into R&D, and that is the pipeline of our workforce going into those critical skills industries. I mean, it seems like a blunt instrument from you, and the coalition hasn't offered up any kind of way for these universities to fill that funding gap. Any ideas?
Well, there are many universities that are actually making quite significant profits, and let's face it, these are tax-free institutions. Some of these are making profits well into the millions. And these are the universities that aren't necessarily providing appropriate accommodation to those students. We want to make sure that we find the balance, we get the balance right. And it's a university by university approach. We want to make sure that our regional universities, for instance, can attract more international students, that they can fill those skills gaps that they need within their local economies. But it's about tackling it individually rather than having what you're calling that blunt approach, a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's the way the Labor government have decided to tackle this.
OK, look forward to those details, Jane. We'll speak soon.
See you, Laura.